Hey everyone, welcome to another top 10 list. This week's top 10 list is the top 10 notes featuring George Washington. Top 10 notes featuring George Washington. This list was suggested by Expect Stacker, and he doesn't have a YouTube channel right now, but he is on Instagram and told me to go ahead and put up his Instagram sign so you guys can check him out there. He's working on getting back on YouTube. He was one of the people that purchased some of the notes that I had from my bank hoard, and that's how we ended up talking through all this stuff. But anyway, he wanted to see the top 10 notes featuring George Washington, and I was happy to oblige. So away we go. Number 10. Number 10, we're talking about the 1957 silver certificate. They made the silver certificates in 1934, 1935, 1957, and of course, then they switched over in 1963 to the Federal Reserve notes. All of those notes all feature George Washington on the small-sized note. It is the note that we are all very familiar with. This one just happens to be a silver certificate. You replace that with a green logo, and you're almost talking the exact same thing as what's in your pocket now. So, silver certificate featuring George Washington, number 10 on my list. Number 9. I brought out one of the North Africa emergency currencies. This was World War II, and this one is a 1935A, of course, featuring George Washington. It was a silver certificate, but the yellow seal on it designated it as North Africa. This way, if there was any problems in the money train, so to speak, in North Africa and in Europe, with the swipe of a pen, they could cancel all these notes and they would be worthless. So yeah, this was only used in World War II, and of course also features George Washington. That's number 9. Number 8, if we're going to talk World War II, we will also talk the Hawaii notes. Hawaii notes also had a different color seal. You're talking a brown seal on these. They also featured Hawaii on the side and on the back of the note as well. Of course, featuring George Washington on the note that we are used to seeing the entire time. The same note has been basically unchanged from 1928 until now. Yeah, the only difference is it's no longer a silver certificate, and we've got the green seal. So that's number 8, the Hawaii note featuring George Washington. Number 7, a little something here. This is a 10-cent note, and you can see from the Act of March 3rd, 1863. George Washington is featured on this particular fractional currency. Now, when it comes to George Washington and fractional currencies, I just happened to pull this particular one. But George Washington is actually featured on no less than 9 different fractional currencies. I don't have all 9 of those, so I wasn't going to attempt to bring them all in there. But just to have one particular piece of fractional currency featuring George Washington was enough to give you guys the idea that there are that many. And it's various denominations as well. I believe he's on everything he's on the 3-cent note. He's on a 5. Here's the 10-cent note. He's on a 25, and I believe he's also on a 50. So yeah, he's on a bunch of different varieties of the fractional currencies. Definitely the most prolific person on the fractional currencies. All right, 10, 9, 8, 7. Number 6. We go from the tiniest note to the biggest. 1923 silver certificate. The 1923 silver certificate and its 1923 red seal legal tender counterpart both look identical from the front. The silver certificate has blue and the blue numeral, and the legal tender that I do not have would have the red seals. But the same picture on them, of course. 1923 silver certificate features George Washington. There's the back of that one for you. So yeah, yet another time that, well, this is the note that pretty much inspired the look of the notes that we have now. So yeah, we've been looking at this image since at least 1923. Next up, this is from 1918. 1918, it says national currency on the top. It's actually a Federal Reserve banknote. They were printed on the same stock as the national banknotes. That's why they both said national currency. Federal Reserve banknote, obviously featuring George Washington right there. What makes these different is these were guaranteed by the actual Federal Reserve banks. 12 Federal Reserve banks in all, and each one was responsible for their own notes. Unlike the national currencies, the national banknotes, those were covered by individual banks, individual national banks, whereas these were the Federal Reserve banks. So the Federal Reserve banknote featuring George Washington, that is next on the list. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, number 4. Getting older. This is a 1917 legal tender. 1917 legal tender features George Washington, of course. Mine is sun bleached. You can make out the seal right there. This note was in a window, and thus the sun bleached most of the inking out of this one. 1917 legal tender. This note basically was unchanged for the longest time, and they reissued different years. The back, really interesting note there, with the crossing pattern and so much green. Very few of the old notes had a lot of white space. The white space is there so that you can actually look in and see the different colored fibers, so that you can identify that the bill was not counterfeit. So that is the 1917 legal tender. Number 3. Backing it up a little bit. This is $18.99, an $18.99 $2 silver certificate. This is the note that replaced the educational series. It's known as the mini porthole. You've got George Washington looking through the equivalent of a mini porthole, thus the name. It's got the really cool blue numeral on it like that. The blue seal, of course, means it's a silver certificate. It says silver right on the bottom, silver certificate there. Taking a look at the back of that note, you've got the big open spots once again, so you can see the red and blue fibers in the note. That is the $18.99 $2 silver certificate featuring George Washington. Number 2. I hope this doesn't disappoint you guys. The reason I put this one at number 2 is because this is the front. This is an 1896 $1 educational note. The $1 educational note does not feature George Washington on the front, which is why I put it at number 2 rather than number 1. It features George Washington and Martha Washington, but they're on the back of the note. So yes, they are still featured on the note, but because they weren't prominently placed on the front of the note, I didn't have the heart to give this one the number 1 spot. So I moved it up as far as I could. The 1896 $1 educational note featuring George and Martha. Since they're both on there, yeah, definitely got to take this one all the way up there. And number 1 on my list. Number 1, this is the note that got me into collecting. The first time I saw this note, I was in. This is a 1922 $20 gold certificate. The first time I saw this note, first of all, you're talking a large size note, so that floored me. Secondly, you're talking about a $20 bill with George Washington on it. Never something I had seen before, never something I even knew existed. Third, you have all of this just beautiful outline on here. That's just, the scrolling and it's just so incredible. And then you've got gold. You've got gold instead of blue or green as far as the seals go, and it even says in gold coin, payable to the bearer on demand. I didn't even know something like this existed when I first got started. When I saw this note, that's what got me hooked. Even the back of this note, the vibrant colors on the back, you're used to seeing the green. Here's the gold, well, orange, however you want to put it. But yeah, 1922 $20 gold certificate featuring, of course, George Washington. This is the note that got me into collecting. So I definitely had to put this at number 1, especially with George front and center on it like that. So that is my top 10 list for notes featuring George Washington. Thank you, Expert Stacker, for suggesting this. I was thinking about doing this list, and you sent me that email, and I was floored that we were both on the same page. And there you go. That's what I have for you guys this week. Thank you very much for watching. If you have an idea for a list, please put it in the comments below, and I will get to work on that. If you agree with my list, don't forget to give me a like. If you disagree, leave a comment and say what you think I missed. Guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week.